upbringing and the people they interact with. The second point about the judges is the corruption. The choices not always are legitimate. Some choices are attached to some context, some criminal organizations, some groups that can bribe the judges. I would like to put an example, I don't know, like the Jeffrey Epstein example. And even the judges are easier to be bribed from that kind of people. A machine will not be able to be bribed from that kind of people. The tier one is the mediatic pressure. Some cases are exposed to all the public, to all the people, and even that kind of cases are broadcast by television. And in some cases, the judges are attached to what the media says. The judge think that if they don't do what the media says, they will be condemned to a social condemnation. And the last and the most important thing is the saturation of the system. We live in a world or the justice system is completely collapsed. Those judges are full of cases, and they just give sentences just to leave it because they are full of cases. They have a lot of job, and the system is completely saturated. So if we put a machine, that machine will be able to do it faster, to have a holistic view of all the case, and will take a better decision. So in this sense, a judicial system must be quick and efficient with its judgment. Jurors are often full of cases, just like I said before, which can hinder the process and slow down the result, such as particular cases, which require deep research, like I said before, may result in shallow investigation and standardized choices. Therefore, the judges may not be the fairest for the victims and the victimizers. Also, I would like to talk about the stakeholders, the victims, stakeholders, that in some cases there are a lot of innocent people in the jail and a lot of guilty people on the streets, and a victim that is not repaired. And also talking about the victimizers, that in some cases that judicial process is violated. In the second point, I would like to talk about how this algorithm will work. So, this algorithm will work keeping in mind the past cases that have been done. In this sense, the algorithm follows the laws and rules of jurisprudence and high courts, in addition to the accessory that the programmers will have. In this sense, there will be two main actors to program that kind of algorithms. The first one will be the high courts that will represent the law in this situation. The second part will be the engineers that respond to that will make that algorithm. First of all, your POI.
Yes. How will your algorithms deal with current biases in all court decisions?
Because those algorithms will be done by many perspectives, taking in account all the context. We're not going to take we're not going to take just the perception that the judge have. We're not going to just take the perception that the engineer have. We're going to take a lot of perception. We're going to put all the laws, all the constitution under that algorithm, and that algorithm will respond in the most objective way to the specific case. So in this sense, that algorithm will respond to the situation of the basis. The algorithm are with the line of judgment. The first one are the typical, that is a behavior that in standard says that is prohibited. The second one is awful, in which causes damage to a legal asset, such as a human life. And the third one is guilty. The person being blamed is one who's really responsible for these problems, like they need it. So just like I said before, the algorithm is in the capacity to understand, process, and save thousands of record prior cases, which allows it to actually make a better jurisprudential calls in certain topics, whereas the human being in general do not have the capacity to process a lot of data as quick as a computer do. And it's the main part of the big data, the big data plays a main role in all the situation, because a human being just can't take all the context, all the perspective, what the lawyer says, what the constitution says, a machine will do. A machine can take all this information and put just in one case and respond to that specific case. Even if there's a mistake in the algorithm. Wait, I know there's no more POI. Okay, so my time is over. So my second speaker will extend it and explain the third argument, the principle of the justice. Thank you.
Lindsay, Matt, are we good to go? Okay, thank you. Thank you, proposition first speaker. Chair recognizes first speaker opposition. And just a note of advice, if everyone could either time themselves or look at the stopwatch that Lindsay is sharing, that would be great, so that we don't, like do something like ask a POI and protected minute. So yeah, without further ado, opposition first speaker. Thank you.
Hi, can you hear me well? Great. Please, the POIs, do it by audio, so just say POI, because I'm not going to be able to see the screen. Also, I'm having some Wi-Fi issues, so I don't know if I can turn on my camera, because I think it would make it worse. So is it okay if I just don't?
Can we do a trial run? Can you open the camera for a little bit and repeat a few sentences maybe?
Okay. Can you hear me?
So far, so good.
Okay.
If it gets choppy, we'll let you know, and then you can turn off the camera.
Great. Panel, proposition lives in a fantasy world with perfect algorithms. We understand judges are flawed, but we believe algorithms are even more so. We also believe that these judges are getting better and better, as we will prove you, and how in our side of the house, justice is eventually better. We would have 3 points in this debate. First, how algorithms legitimize racial bias. Secondly, how algorithms worsen accountability. And thirdly, why is there a vicious cycle of bias with the algorithm, explained by my second speaker. But first, some rebuttals to first proposition. So first of all, on their explanation of how will the algorithm work, they said to us, algorithms receive data like someone coming from a nice neighborhood with little crime, or perhaps not even having had incidents with the police, and instantly come to the conclusion that the individual isn't high risk. This is very problematic, panel, because it means dangerous individuals might not receive as much time in jail or mental institutions as they should. It could mean white supremacists being released back again into society and endangering the livelihoods of minorities. This, we believe, it is not fair. Thus, this means that algorithms could bring great harms, perpetuating the strong oppression of minorities while letting dangerous individuals endanger and threaten the lives of thousands. Before I continue to my second point, is there a POI?
Yes, there's a point here.
Yes.
Could you explain to me how does this thing of unfair punishment does not happen in your world, or how does it even happen less?
Thank you. I'm going to just explain that. So how algorithms worsen accountability, right? This deals specifically with the solvency we're talking about. So first of all, understand how there's more transparency, right? In our model, we specify on how we would track and publish racial disparity on sentencing by judges. So this would be effective because it would allow social movements to more directly highlight what current biases the justice system currently has, due to the fact that publishing this information is very explicit and appears legitimate. Secondly, engaging with the point that judges respond to social pressure that Team Proposition says, it would incentivize judges to try to consciously counter their biases. Judges want to maintain a good reputation in order to get enough votes to keep their position, and appearing as very biased judge in these reports isn't the best thing for their reputation. So understand how at the end we have more a better accountability, because it allows you to denounce and counter possible mistakes in the legal system. These denounces are very important, and for all of these reasons, very proud to oppose this motion.
I just need 2 minutes. I'll be back.
Hi.
Hello.
Okay, I thought my internet was off. Thanks.
No, I believe we are waiting for the chair to return.
Okay, okay.
Sorry about the delay. Thank you, first speaker opposition. Chair recognizes second speaker proposition.
Hi, can you hear me? Okay, before I start, I'm gonna set my own stopwatch just in case. And
If the POIs are...
I'd rather have the POIs through the camera. I'm paying constant attention to the screen. So if there's any point from Panama, they just show a sign or raise their hand or turn on their cameras. Okay, so I'm gonna start my speech in 3, 2, 1. So good morning, everyone. And first of all, I would like to state that opposition didn't actually answer the point of information that we did in the last speech. And it is that how are they showing us, judges and us, government, how in the world there's a reduction of the consequences and the negative situations present in the judicial system of today. Because we've asked opposition, how in your world you are going to solve the situation of unfair punishes and racial biases that you can see in the judges of today? And they didn't answer the question, and they just stated that our world is completely full of fantasy, and it is completely unrealistic. And now I'm going to clear the air, state some things that need to be stated, and then proceed with the rest of the arguments that we have as proposition and the main comparisons that need to be shown in order for us to win this debate. So first of all, they state that, and they have always criticized about how are we going to manage the biases, and we've stated several times that this algorithm is made up by the legal systems of each country and an engineering system in order for it to make an important program. They say, well, this system and being made by the judges is going to be as biased as it is nowadays. But the thing is that law itself and law as in its creation is not biased at all. The thing is the interpretation and the management that is given by the human judges is the one that makes it actually biased because of their experiences, their interactions with society, and so on and so forth. So the thing is that if judges, as it is written, if the law says, do not kill, one who kills might be punished, then the algorithm is going to process that information. And the thing is, talking about information, is that to find a judge, to find a trial, and to conduct an investigation and to find the jurisdictional process in order to make the right solution, people and judges need to have a lot of data, have a lot of analysis. And this is the main reason why most criminal trials tend to have a longer duration. And the thing is, even if it is in the best world of opposition, we're playing with a fair judge, a judge that is extremely committed to its work, a judge that is extremely focused into analyzing each small detail and each prior decision to a certain case. They do not have the time or the resources to make a fast and efficient solution and analysis of this stuff without their emotions being involved or just because of the time. because we've not developed yet, and the machines that we've created as a society have gained the ability to process more information, more data, and to make more rational decisions based on prior circumstances that are the ones that are going to be implemented in the creations of these algorithms. Because if we apply the law as it is, if we apply the law as the right decisions, as they should be, then these algorithms might will work in the way that we expect them to do so. Now, there's the chance that they do not, or that they make several or wrong mistakes, such as the opposition said. But the thing is that it is easier to change the algorithm and the way it makes its decisions than to change the racial bias of a person. Because a grown person or a grown woman, a grown man or a grown woman will have their own mind set into making this decision. And the thing is that they do not, and we do not have the capability of changing human brains, but we do have the capability of changing computers. And by changing computers, we are in the capacity of changing the way that we are going to respond to these situations. Now, before I continue with this main review, short reviews, I'll go with the point of Panama. Please be quick.
So when a computer doesn't have empathy, we think it's more likely for them to care about things like deterrence. This look like caring about putting a person in jail just because he's a black minority that might live in a geographic specific area.
Thank you. I understand your point, and the thing is that by applying and by creating these systems, there's a way to balance the things and the facts, and to balance the situations and circumstances. Because thinking about how much resources and the people that are going to be involved, we cannot create a bare algorithm that just says you're a criminal or you're innocent. No, the thing is that in order for these things to work, and the thing that we've been stating the most is that the process in which they are created have to take into account prior decisions, which involve the thing that you're asking of opposition, which is how are they going to state empathy, and the main situation of the case. Now, the thing is, we've had the third point that we want to bring in this debate as government, it is what justice is supposed to pursue. And now, a decision and a sentence is supposed to ask for prevention of the repetition of the systems, social reinsertion of the criminals, and retribution to the victims. Now, the thing is that nowadays these things often are not fulfilled. They're not being righteous choices, and there's a lot of confinement in jails and people that are that do not have a justification to be in prison. And what happens when these people are being unrighteously condemned? Well, these people enter to the world of crime. These people damage the system, and there's not an actual response to the main issues that justice tries to tackle, which is the main thing that they have said in opposition, but they haven't answered throughout this debate. And the thing is that by this algorithm, we may ensure that by this set of logical steps, by this set of legal interpretations of law, and by this set of steps that will lead us to make a righteous decision, we may allow in the long term to avoid this confinement in prisons, that we may allow and we might pursue the main interests of law, and that we may pursue the main interests of justice that, as I previously stated, are prevention, social reinsertion, and retribution to the victims. Now, keeping on with the comparison of how the main and current issues are responded in the world, and how in the world of opposition they have not given us an answer, how they are actually responding to these main issues that affect the way in which justice works. Well, the thing is that they also stated that there's the way of putting these trials and these decisions up to the public, but the thing is that they do not work like that. There's going to keep on being biased solution, and that the main and the only thing that is going to give us a certainty about how we're going to gain a majority approval of the decisions, and a logical and more reasonable solution that might give a better response about all the people involved, is by analyzing the certain criteria that needs to be analyzed in order to make a judicial decision. And that is by analyzing all the big data that my previous partner previously explained in its intervention. And the thing is that as I said before, humans do not have the capacity of analyzing this data itself. Now, they might have they might want some evidence in order to support these affirmations. And the thing is that some countries have been implementing the usage of big data in order to make better decisions, make quicker decisions, and make more efficient decisions. Countries such as China or Hong Kong have actually implemented in their criminal justice. And the thing is, they have identified the same problem that we've stated and we've presented to you, judges, and they have found a better solution in order to continue, because law itself has evolved, and nowadays we need to evolve in order to fulfill its purposes, in order to ensure the security and the well-being of society, and to ensure that its compositions and its objectives are fulfilled. Thank you so much.
Lindsay, Matt, if you're ready, should we invite the next speaker? Okay, Chair recognizes second speaker of the opposition. Thank you, second speaker of the proposition.
All right. Is it okay if I turn off my camera? Like, I've been having really unstable internet the whole morning, so I don't know if that might contribute to my speech turning on some part. I don't know.
Well, it is fine right now. What I would recommend is, if your voice starts to get choppy, if your coach or your teammates can message you, and then you can, maybe turn it off.
All right,
and
then.
Also, yeah, if you could also state your POI preference.
Oh, okay. Please state your POIs through the voice chat. Just say it out loud, because I won't be checking the chat throughout my speech. All right, then. Give me just 1 second to set up my timer, and I'll start. Okay, so I'm gonna start in 3, 2, 1 now. All right, judges. Proposition's case problem is that they argue with a flawless, perfect algorithm. Unfortunately, these algorithms are pretty biased, pretty flawed, and nothing that proposition says happens based on that. Because of that, very proud to oppose this motion. So first, in my speech, I'll address some rebuttals to proposition's case. Then I'll bring more points on how we actually solve most of the things that proposition is talking about from our side of the house. And lastly, I'll bring an argument on how, in principle, our measure is better. So then, tackling the case that proposition has brought us until now. So first, they brought us some very skewed characterization of how the current justice system works. So first off, they talk about the saturation of the system, of how sentencing is oh so slow. But directly in response to this, we believe that the slowness of the justice system is not on the sentencing, but actually on determining guilt, because it is at this step that you have to look for evidence, that you have to get witnesses, whatever. When it comes to sentencing, it's something that isn't as tedious and doesn't slow down and makes the system inefficient as propositions want to say. Their problem would be true if we would be debating about proving guilt, but we are not proving guilt. We are sentencing. So that is irrelevant for this debate. So now on their point about judges. So they basically wanted to prove that judges have biases by saying that they are prone to immediate pressure in society, but they never actually prove us why their algorithms will be less biased in that sense, and we will further on prove you why these algorithms will be actually worse. So now, on an interesting point they brought about corruption, they basically tell us that judges are prone to corruption, and this is very bad because they take bad decisions. We believe that this is a very skewed characterization, because bribes put on stake a judge's reputation and a judge's whole career. Notice that in order to be a judge in the first place, judges have to be in this career for a large amount of years. Not only that, usually these bribes are in the case that they actually even exist, they are very high. We believe that bribing and corruption are extremely unlikely to happen in our side of the house and not an important problem. They are more of an exception than an actual problem that is spread in the whole justice system. So now, tackling the algorithm characterization that proposition has brought, we believe that it's extremely problematic, because first, notice how proposition in both their speech have explained how they will use past precedents in order to code their algorithm. Daniela spent almost 3 minutes of her speech explaining how this data by itself is biased and might mean that algorithms will reproduce these historical biases without any chance of changing them. This is basically because garbage in, garbage out. Algorithms will just imitate those old past racist decisions that old judges took, and just believe that it's a true way to work around, and it's a good way to work around. They also try to bring in the figure of engineers coding these algorithms as trying to explain that these algorithms will be unbiased. We believe that it is not enough to just say we will have engineers and suddenly everything's fixed, happiness, because we believe that engineers will also be likely to be biased. We have explained how these engineers are likely to come from a very specific demographic group, probably white straight males, because these governments will want to hire the top engineers, and the only people that have access to the best universities are the people belonging to this very select group of demographics. In that sense, we believe that their biases are also very likely to be translated into the way the algorithm works by itself. Now, why do we believe that an algorithm being biased is so much worse than even our worst case scenario? We believe that because with algorithms, we only have these very vicious cycles of perpetuating racism with no way of going out. What do I mean by this? Yes, we must understand that these algorithms and artificial intelligence, they work by reproducing patterns they see. They are not making their own decisions, but rather creating a feedback loop or a self-fulfilling prophecy. That means that every new decision they take just reinforces previous ones. This is, for example, minorities getting harsher sentences because these algorithms believe that that minorities have more reincidency rates, and thus these minorities spending more time in jail, having more difficulty to adapt into society, and then displaying these higher reincidency rates. Notice that the algorithm will just reproduce the same consequences they themselves create. It is very difficult to change the way an algorithm reacts or an algorithm reproduces these things. Now, why do we cite proposition actually bring solvency to all of these problems? Two reasons for this. First, transparency. We believe that, as we explained in our model, people can highlight current biases that judges may have, but because we will publish all the statistics of biased sentencing, and we will make every judge actually explain the decision behind the reason behind the decision. In that sense, we believe that people will be more easily highlight these biases on judges. And not only that, we believe that judges will be more likely to react and have the incentives because they want to preserve their reputation. They want to keep being voted in as a judge. They want to keep in having this appearance of being legitimate and of being a good judge. And in order to do that, they cannot appear as a biased judge. The same is not true for algorithms because of a point I will explain further on. But secondly, we believe that we actually bring solvency because of accountability. As we have explained, judges will actually have to explain their rationale. And the way to analyze what the judges decided is just literally like analyzing a debate. It's just analyzing that there's consistency between the arguments that the judge displayed. It's to analyze that whatever they are saying makes sense. And we believe that in that sense, we bring this kind of solvency. People can just say that whatever they took isn't correct. Compare this to cite proposition. Why this accountability and transparency doesn't happen? Two reasons for this. First, because people believe that tech is subjective. This is because of automation bias. People have this idea that there is scientific validity behind everything done by an algorithm. The assumption is that an algorithm is more likely to be correct because we rely so much on algorithms on our daily life. Like, I don't know, when you use Netflix, when YouTube recommends you a video, whatever, people believe Based on people's experience, people believe that there is at least some degree of reliability on algorithms to be had. So this means that people usually believe that tech is flawless and analytical in a way they don't do for people. So they are extremely less likely to question tech in the first place. And even in the case that people can actually question the decisions that tech took, second reason, we believe that people don't really understand technology. Because as I have already explained, it's easy to understand a judge's decision. It's basically just analyzing how a debate works, but on top of that, we also have brought some measures, like for example, judges explicitly stating why their decision was the way it was. Compare this to proposition, where algorithms used for sentencing are pretty much a black box, unexplainable even to data scientists and people that work with machine learning. This is because in the process of creation of machine learning algorithms, their code becomes so complex that data scientists can only analyze them by analyzing their inputs and their outputs. You cannot make these algorithms accountable as proposition wants to say. You cannot fix them as easily as proposition wants to say, because you have no idea what's happening in the inner rationality of these algorithms. You only know the output that they create. It is difficult to actually spot the problems they have. Because we actually solve these problems, and because we actually finish this cycle of sending minorities to jail unfairly, very proud to oppose this motion.
Just checking in with the judges. Are we good to go? Okay, thank you. Second speaker, opposition. Chair recognizes third speaker from the proposition.
Can everyone hear me properly?
Yes. Could you let us know how you would prefer the POIs to be asked from the other team?
Yes, I would prefer my POI verbally, because I am not watching your faces. I'm just watching the stopwatch. Okay, so my speech starts in 3, 2, 1. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I'd like to explain why the opposition team is just playing around with our worst case scenario, and it's not with unjustified problems that I'm going to review later on in my speech. First of all, I would like to clarify some rebuttals that are just necessary in this debate. That is, for example, where justice is better. That is what both teams and both houses already agree on what would be the metric of this debate, and it's where justice is better. They can barely prove that justice is better in their world because they are with the status quo, and they are not even explaining why their word is better. We can explain that our word is better because we are eliminating all kinds of bias. We already explained that, because they might say that as judges, or they said that judges program with engineers these algorithms, but we already stated that this algorithm may be programmed by engineers and legal assessors, but its basis are the law and its constitution and all the legal records needed in order for the algorithm to compare those cases, to compare those laws and those statements and make the proper decision. Yes, maybe there are some cases that are more particular than others. But in most of the cases, the law is clear and unequivocal. It does not give rise to any interpretation, but to the pure and simple application of the precept and its literal diction. Because law is precise most of the times, and there is no space for interpretation, and just make a decision. Yes, this is a debate. We're talking about the algorithm needs to figure out who is guilty and who is don't, because that is how justice works. That is how we reach the pure justice. It's also important to mention that minorities are better in our world. They claim that on their side, but it's not true, because they might say that bias in their side are going to be eliminated, but that's not true. First of all, because they say that media pressure, the reputation and the career of a judge, but that's not true. As my second speaker already stated, that is not how it works. Maybe a few cases, even if that's true, a few cases are the ones that reach social media popularity, and they are barely even presented in the news. But that is not how it works. Most of the cases just stays in the shadow, and that not even affecting the reputation of the judge, and not even making a difference. So that would be eliminated, and that would be avoided in our world, because we are presenting an algorithm that maybe, yes, could make mistakes, but as we already explained, it's easy to fix. Also, they already mentioned that this algorithm is very complex and hard to change. And they mentioned that scientists already struggle to find as a problem in their algorithm. But I would like to say that that is not true. Judges, yes, it is a complex algorithm. It must be a complex algorithm because we're talking about decision-making and justice and law of a country. So it must be complex, yes, but it's easy to find and it's easy to fix the problem. Why is that? Because an algorithm is composed by codes. Each code represents an action. If we already spot the problem, like this decision is wrong because of this, this, and this, we can already know the action that is wrong, so we know what code to fix. This is easily to fix in comparison of their world, because as my second speaker already mentioned, it's impossible to change thousands of minds of judges that has a bias or a wrong perception of reality. Before I continue, the POI of Panama.
If your algorithm is supposed to take these very important decisions, like weighting these conditions or taking nuance of the cases, how will you achieve that with such a simple algorithm as just lines of code?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand your point, but if you would want, you can make it later on. Continuing with my speech, it's also important to mention that our algorithm would be programmed by, yes, engineers and legal assessors, as we already mentioned. But what does this imply? What is the impact of this? That it would guarantee objectivity. It would guarantee social trust, because it's the government, it's the social system which is programming and coded that algorithm. That's why it would bring trust and it would be fair for everyone, because it's the law. It's not any interpretation of it. It's the law and its records and its legal documentation that it has just one meaning, it has one interpretation, and it's really clear and precise. And it would also guarantee the adaptation throughout time. That's a problem that opposition does not solve in their case, because some judges are advancing through time. They have the old-minded cases, and they have the old-minded decisions. So they are not advancing through time. Yes, there are new judges every year because people have education and become judges, yes, but they are still for a long period of time working those old-minded judges. And this would not happen in our side, because we are guaranteeing an adaptation throughout time, because there are updates and there are things to fix, and this algorithm would be adapted throughout time easier than the actual juridical system. Lastly, I would like to, yes, before I continue, the POI of Panama.
Yeah, the thing is that what you're saying is false. The algorithm is a constant code that learns, and how you say, it adapts itself. It gets to a point that's so complex that scientists or engineers...
Yeah, I already understand your point. It is important to mention that it is an algorithm. It's not artificial intelligence. So it will be programmed by engineers. Yes, it could maybe evolve in some things because it's a decision-making machine, but it would be totally on the control of the government, totally on the control of the courts and of the legal personnel that it's going to monitor it. And also the opposition chamber is talking about the false negative and what would happen if a low race is placed as a high race and that stuff. But as we already mentioned, this is not true because the minorities would be very in our side because we are eliminated every kind of racism, every kind of bias, and every kind of impunity that is already exists in the judicial system. So we are not picturing a perfect world. We are just picturing a better one. So it's important to take that into account. As I end, and thank you very much.
Hi, can you hear me? Wait. Okay, now can you hear me?
Yeah. If you could just let us know how you would prefer the POIs to be asked.
I would prefer for them to use the microphone, but like to be respectful at the same time. Like if I say that I don't want it right now, I mean it. Okay. Look, it's pretty okay if my Netflix account use wrong algorithms, right? Because it's like a simple mistake. I don't care about that much. But when we're talking about the sentencing system, when we're talking about an algorithm that people believe that it is an objective truth and they are not incentivized to change it or to push for pressure, and it's likely going to be using biased data, we think the comparative in this debate is clear. Even in a worst case scenario, when there are still some judges that are biased, in the comparative, we believe the system as a whole is better when we are not damaging communities, when we are not forcing communities to believe or to believe in an algorithm that is going to be used by Republican Party to say that, you see, now Black communities are actually more dangerous and it's not a biased thing, right? Two main questions in this speech. First, which system is less biased and less corrupted? And secondly, let's talk about accountability and how we also win that clash. So about the bias system, first, they tell us that judges have preconceptions, and we accept that at a certain extent. But we also talk to you about the status quo tendency of social movements that deter judges. And we think this is a huge concession that they claim in their first speech when they said one of the incentives of the judges it's social pressure. But this social pressure doesn't look like it used to look 20 years ago. It looks like Black Lives Matter movement pushing forward for the Minneapolis policemen to dismantle itself. We think that's the kind of social pressure that we have on our side of the house, where judges are deterred of taking those biased decisions because they don't want to lose their jobs, right? But secondly, they told us about corruption and bribes, and they tell us like, oh, it's quite difficult to see if these people are corrupted or if these people are by other individuals. Two responses to that. First, we told you that they are deterred by the consequences of these acts, right? We think if you are likely to prove that a judge was bought off, it is very likely that the judge will lose his work. We think it is important for them to understand that they're not willing to sacrifice their jobs in order to forgive one criminal. But secondly, we told you in our first speech why we will force we will force judges to write their sentences down in order for people to realize if it was like a clear misconception or a clear bias. Within the comparative, people are more likely to understand sentencing statements, the algorithm, because we didn't study machine learning, right? Probably I would never study computer science. We think that's a reality for most people, but not only a reality of most people. We think it's actually hard to understand those algorithms, but I will talk about that in my second speech. Now, let's talk about their system, because they say, no, look, it's just that we will use developers that are impartial. And we told you like, oh, okay, but you're very likely to choose people that are from a majority, right? Like white people who graduate from Yale or Harvard, because those are the kind of people that study machine learning. And they told us like, no, but the law is clear and objective, and the problem is interpretation. So we don't have that because the law is very clear. This is so we start, and it's a huge concession in this debate. They tell us like, oh, it's just they will understand law because law is very clear. We don't think that is true. We think if you kill a person, you need to take into consideration if you steal from someone, you need to take into consideration other factors that are mitigatory. For example, if I steal because I had the necessity to do it, or if I was forced to do it, or if I did it just because I liked it to do, right? So we think those factors are not highly clear how they're going to be taken into consideration on their side of the house. Secondly, about the use of past decisions, we think this is exactly what we are opposing to. We think those decisions are biased at the first step, that the algorithm can interpret that if a person is from a Black community in Harlem, we think they are more likely to commit this crime again. So because the algorithm is so effective and the machine learning evolutionate, we think they are more likely to target these people in the comparative, to force them into jails and do it in a systematic way that it's worse in the comparative. So what do we have from this system? The system is not less biased as they told you about. We think it's actually more in the comparative, because now people cannot actually identify the bias in a first step. And I would expand on this on our second point of clash. But before that, last point here, I will take it later. So last point here, they tell us that humans can take into consideration all factors, but machines can. Look, our answer is pretty simple. Developers are the ones that design and take into consideration the factors that we want to use in the algorithm. We think their capacity is also limited, and they are likely to force other factors that they believe are more important. We think those factors are like deterrence or protect people from the status quo. We told you that in our first two speeches, and that's why we think the focus of effectiveness, it will be harder on Black communities on their side of the house, or it's more likely to be harder. But secondly, we think the algorithm becomes so complex, you don't know why or how the weighing is working, right? You don't know what are the factors that actually are taken into consideration, if you are taking into consideration necessity or other factors. Before I continue to the second point of clash, I will take the POI. The POI?
Don't you think that your example, such as Black Lives Matter movement, just proves our point that the justice system is not true and it's not fair?
Oh, all right, like we told you, like we're not gonna prove, of course we wouldn't win this debate if we tell you like the justice system is perfect, right? What we told you is that in your side of the house is worse, because the algorithm is likely to be untrackable, to be not checked by expertise. The people can understand it, and the Republicans can say, look, Black communities are actually a harm for society. I don't say it, it says it, the machine says this, that's why we think it's right? But let's talk about that in accountability, because they tell us, oh, it's so easy, Gisa. We can change the algorithm if we realize that it's something wrong. For this point, they need to prove two things. First, that the government or people have incentive to push for this change. And secondly, that they are capable to do so. They don't prove any of those. The incentive we told you about, how is it that people trust algorithms blindly? Because they believe that machines are technological advanced. Jose said that on his second speech, and Daniela claimed it in her first speech. We think it looks like people not actually going against those mechanisms, or like Republican parties going and defending this kind of mechanisms because they think they are so good and they are objective truths that are not judges. But they tell us no, but it's just in the second we can change it. We can actually change it. We don't think they're capable to do it, right? We told you how machine learning is so complex that even the best data science can identify how it's working because the algorithms evolutionate to a moment with, and it's why now what is happening with Facebook and Instagram algorithms, not even best scientists get it, but only if the best scientists get it. We don't think that's the majority of cases for people because people on the ground don't get it. So they are less likely to understand what the bias is and push for that, right? But let's look then the comparative. Even in the worst case scenario, when most cases stay in the shadow, like the last speaker said, we think in the comparative, we're not talking about the whole system corrupt. We're not talking about the whole system not incentivized to follow measures that are not biased. Because of that, very proud to oppose. Thank you.
Are we ready to start reply speeches? Thank you, third speaker, opposition. We invite reply speaker from the opposition.
Can you hear me well? Yes?
Yeah, I can. Well, at least I can.
Yeah, we can hear you. Please go ahead.
Great. Microsoft made an algorithm that treated based on different variables. At first, it was cool, but because the algorithm learns by itself and it starts adapting and changing as proposition accepts, then it became an algorithm that was actually treating racist things. The thing is that, panel, imagine a justice system like that. In conclusion, we believe that you cannot predict how eventually the algorithm is going to take decisions because it learns by itself. It's not as simple as proposition claims. We've explained to you in all of the debate. So we have 3 questions in the speech. First, are algorithms changeable? Secondly, where is corruption more likely to change? And lastly, is justice systems conglomeration important? And our first question, are algorithms changeable? So they told you engineers will input this information, that they will use all info, including precedents. We've explained to you how, first of all, you can only change inputs and outputs and can only read them, right? But you cannot change the biases of history and precedents in which you can see how African Americans, for example, are way more likely to be put in jail than white people. And this is because of structural problems we explained to you. Secondly, they cannot be read. We've explained to you how they are black boxes. They cannot change something you can read well. This was never responded by not even a third opposition, right? Secondly, where is corruption more likely to change? So understand how this deals with accountability, right? So they never prove to you what are the incentives for the state or the people to change the algorithm if they see, for example, like it is putting more African Americans unjustly on jail, right? But we explained to you in our second speech how there are not incentives to challenge the algorithm's decisions because people see these kind of algorithms and technology as something reliable, right? It is not enough for them to say that these kind of algorithms will be changed. They have to explain the incentives. Never did. Understand how in our side of the house, social pressure is very important, and they accepted this since their first speech, right? Understand how in our side of the house, we explain to you how judges are very focused on their reputation because like their job relies on it, right? And because like all of the media and social pressure and the status quo, we explain to you how, for example, Black Lives Matter and all of these movements are have taken more strength now. We believe that in our side of the house, at least this kind of accountability is more likely to happen to judges, right? But lastly, how is justice systems conglomeration important? Understand how we explain to you how sentencing is not deciding if a person is guilty or not, right? We explain to you how actually all of what the algorithm is going to do is just decide the amount of years the person is going to spend in jail. They're not going to decide whether they're guilty or not. So understand that all of they say about how much time it takes and how it is efficient, they cannot claim this. But lastly, understand how they can also not claim efficiency when they have a huge amount of complex code that you cannot even change. If you cannot change and you understand that this code it is biased, then there is no way to actually do it. They never engage with this panel, and for all of these reasons, very, very proud to oppose this motion.
Chair invites replies to your proposition.
Can you hear me well again? Okay. Wait, let me organize my desk a little bit. Okay, so I'll begin my reply speech in 3, 2, 1. Well, first and foremost, we need to identify what was the main thing that we recognized both as chambers throughout this debate. And the thing is that we've recognized that the current status quo of justice is completely surrounded by a lot of issues such as racial or political social bias, such as corruption, such as social pressure, etc. Now, that's the main engagement that opposition is going to do throughout the whole debate, and let me explain why. First of all, we've presented 3 main points regarding about the current problems of the judicial system, how our algorithm is going to work, and what are the main objectives of justices and how we're going to fulfill them by using the algorithm. Now, the main clashes that were present throughout this debate is the complexity of decisions, and throughout the complexity of decision, we can understand that there's maybe a complexity, but not in the decision, but a complexity in the decision on the making of the algorithm. But at the end of the day, there's also complexity within the decision and the explanation of the decision in the real life, because people do not understand, or regular people do not understand law as a whole. Second, there's the pace in which decisions are taken. And in our world, we've proven several times that by using this algorithm, we're going to ensure that the analysis of the different circumstances and the different data that needs to be analyzed is going to make the algorithm to have an easier decision, because even in the best world of opposition, a human person is not in the capacity of processing tons and tons of information, tons of law in order to make a quick, efficient decision. That's just simply not possible. In the third place, there's the clash about the correction of mistakes and how in our world it is easier to change a decision or to make a correction to the system, because an algorithm is used to modify the code itself, but we cannot rule out a decision made by a judge. Even more, we cannot change the social political bias that in some cases might be related to its subconscious of the judges. So we've proven now in this world that even if there are mistakes in our world and it could be a flawed algorithm, we have a larger capacity of response and of correction of these mistakes. And the most important clarity that was given throughout this debate is the objectivity of these decisions. They've stated several times that our algorithms are going to be biased, but as my teammates have explained before, the composition of this algorithm and the team that is going to work in order to create this complex algorithm is going to work in order to ensure that this algorithm takes the law as it should be, takes the law as it is written, not as one may see, because the thing is that nowadays the law is subjected to the opinion of the judges, and that's what has made the main issue of this conflict. And it is the trust that people have in the judicial systems, because they've stated that we're not going to assure them security, we're not going to ensure them trust in our system. But the thing is that the main situation that happened today and that they bring up throughout this debate is that, for example, Black Lives Matter, or there are some populations that are vulnerable, and that vulnerability is the direct response and the direct result of the misusage of justice given by the usage of a human person in the figure of judges. So we actually ensure trust in population, minding the bigger analysis and minding the bigger system that we've created in our world. And even in our worst case scenario, we've ensured that we might allow a better decision, because as Pablo said, we might not ensure a perfect world, but we're ensuring a better one than the status quo, while opposition does not engage with us and does not prove us how they're going to solve the main situations, because technology has always been there to help human beings find a solution to their problems and their capacities. And we've proven that this is the way to go and the way to evolve. And we've given also examples that back up how criminal justice needs a lot of data that can only be managed by using these algorithms such as China, Hong Kong, or Spain. Thank you so much.
Thank you, reply speaker proposition. We're lucky to have a member of the ORCOM here. Sergio, thank you for being in the room. And thank you, Adria, also for being here. Do we need to, can you guys move us to a deliberation room?
Sure.
Thank you.
Buen debate.
Buen debate también.
Year after year, the World Schools Debating Championship gathers the best debaters from around the globe. This year's pandemic made that impossible, so we took it online. In this style of debate, there are two teams. The proposition team, which is in favor of the motion, and the opposition team, which is against it. Each side features 3 speakers giving 4 speeches. The first 2 speakers generally present constructive argumentation. The third primarily focuses on refutation, while the reply speaker summarizes the debate. For the prepared rounds, teams research the motions for weeks in advance. For the impromptu rounds, teams have only 1 hour to prepare after being told the motion.